Right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. Thanks, my friend. And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. By some measures, this was one of the scariest moments in recent American history. January 2009, we lost more than 800,000 jobs, the most in more than a generation. The following month, we lost another 700,000 jobs. We were shedding jobs the way a sheepdog sheds fur in summer. The economy was like a boulder running downhill, crushing things as it went, but just picking up speed as it rolled. And in the middle of that harrowing, are we still tumbling? Yes, we are still tumbling national freefall. President Obama signed a $700 billion economic stimulus plan into law to try to arrest that fall, to try to make the nightmare stop. The president went to Denver, Colorado to sign that bill when it was ready to be signed. And on the occasion of President Obama's trip to Denver to sign that stimulus bill to try to save the economy, they staged a rally called Barack Obama, You Don't Know Stimulus. It had a name. And I say it was a staged rally because it was organized by Americans for Prosperity, which put out a call on conservative networks for people to show up in costume pig noses and carrying giant checks. It was a staged protest with help from the Tea Party group, Americans for Prosperity. They staged these in states around the country, not always with pig noses. At the rally in Virginia, you can see the supposedly grassroots angry commoners all showed up with pre-printed Americans for Prosperity signs. Also that year, Americans for Prosperity tried the same kind of color-by-numbers prefab protest on energy issues. They called it their Hot Air Tour, a supposedly grassroots movement against the whole idea that global warming might be a real thing. 2009 was the year when Joe the Plumber was still briefly famous, and Americans for Prosperity hired him. They sent Joe the Plumber around the country on a supposedly grassroots campaign against union rights. If you go to recessrally.com today just looks like another dodgy, generic weight loss scam site. But back in 2009, in the middle of all those AstroTurf campaigns, recessrally.com was where Americans for Prosperity orchestrated yet another supposedly grassroots campaign against health reform before the bill ever passed Congress. Americans for Prosperity orchestrated supposedly spontaneous outpourings against health care, thanks to the tender guidance and cash of the Americans for Prosperity benefactors known as Charles and David Koch. If you combine the two billionaire brothers' net worths together, Charles and David Koch collectively are the richest man in America. Individually, they're halfway down the top 10 list, I think, at this point, but combined, they have more money than anybody else in the country. They got that way because they inherited a privately owned oil and chemical corporation from their dad. They've used that immense fortune to try to create the impression that large numbers of grassroots Americans believe exactly what the billionaire brothers believe about what is best for America, and also what is best for Koch Industries, but regardless, America, too. Now the Koch brothers have a whole new campaign going. We've been talking on this show about the Koch brothers funding the groups that brought us the government shutdown. Koch Industries declaimed any public responsibility for the shutdown once it got underway, but Koch brothers groups were funded to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. The major groups that pressured the Republicans to do it were all funded by Koch-related outfits. Now, though, the government shutdown is over. They started turning the lights back on again on Thursday. That means stuff like, oh, we're finally getting a new jobs report 2.5 weeks after it was due. The people who put together that report got furloughed, so we won't get the 2.5 weeks late jobs report until tomorrow. New poll out today from CNN says for the first time since they took control of the House, Americans think it's a bad thing that Republicans have control of the House since they used that power to shut down the government and bring us to the brink of default. A majority of Americans in the new CNN poll say they don't want Republicans controlling the Congress anymore because when they control the Congress, that's bad for America. So politically, the 16-day-long shutdown was not kind for Republicans while it was dragging on. It continues to hurt them now that it's over. The Tea Party wing of the Republican Party, though, insists that the shutdown was worth it. It was worth shutting everything down to strike a stylistic, if not symbolic, if not substantive blow against Obamacare, which they hate so much. They're warning already, even in the wake of the shutdown, even in the wake of poll numbers like those from CNN. They're warning in the wake of the shutdown that their fight against Obamacare, their fight against more Americans having health insurance, is a fight that has only just begun. Cheryl Gay Stolberg at the New York Times has been reporting on what the sharp end of that Republican campaign looks like now. It's not happening in Washington. It's actually happening in the states, in state capitals. And it turns out that effort in the states looks a lot like those fake AstroTurf, Koch brothers funded rallies about the stimulus bill or union rights or whether or not global warming's a real thing. Hundreds of volunteers in green T-shirts turned out for a commission hearing, bussed in by the Americans for Prosperity field organizers who provided them with Subway sandwiches for their lunch. Quote, this has been one of those trench warfare kind of efforts for about a year now, and I think it's one of those hidden stories of the whole fight against Obamacare, says the president of Americans for Prosperity. It's not flashy, it's just in a whole bunch of state capitals and in the districts of a whole lot of state legislators, but it is such a crucial aspect of the overall long-term effort to roll back Obamacare. Trench warfare for a year now in a whole bunch of state capitals. The specific state capital in that report was Richmond, Virginia, where the Republican-controlled state government is still considering whether to use federal money to offer health insurance to thousands of people who do not currently have health insurance in Virginia. The Koch brothers are orchestrating this fight against expanded health insurance in Virginia, right down to the bright green T-shirts packing all the public meetings. Last night, a Tea Party chapter in Northern Virginia sent out this email to all of its members asking them to turn out for another Virginia hearing today. They say, quote, this time our goal is to have our expert witnesses testify for our position. There's been a move to silence us and not allow our witnesses. However, we will have 2 witnesses of the 7 this time. They continue, unfortunately, Americans for Prosperity, meaning the Koch brothers group, they will not be providing us buses this time. Please come anyway, if at all possible, to support our witnesses, support our Tea Party witnesses. Yeah, there may not be a Koch brothers funded bus to drive us to it this time, but at least we'll have our witnesses telling Virginia what to do on health reform. And sure enough, if you look at the agenda for this Virginia state government hearing today, right there under Medicaid reform options Virginia should consider are 2 witnesses from Koch brothers connected groups. 2 of them scheduled for 45 minutes of public time, brought to you by the same billionaires who spun those 2009 town halls against Obamacare out of pure air, who spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the organizations who brought on the government shutdown from which the nation is still emerging. When the guy from Americans for Prosperity says they're waging trench warfare in state capitals around the country, this is what they mean. And they're not just in Virginia. The same woman from the hearing in Virginia, here she is telling the Idaho State Senate to not expand Medicaid under Obama. Here she is again in Oklahoma, telling lawmakers in that state not to give more people health insurance. Here she is in New Hampshire, telling lawmakers there, quote, in my opinion, I don't think there's one good reason to expand Medicaid. She must be getting very good at fitting her luggage into the overhead compartment. Look, here she is again, this time in Mississippi, talking to lawmakers there as a, quote, Medicaid expert. This is a traveling AstroTurf roadshow of Koch brothers connected, quote-unquote, experts, all trying to stop the states from getting health insurance to people who don't have it now, particularly to low-income people. We saw this with the Koch brothers trying to stop college students from signing up for health insurance, right? Remember the creepy ads with the big papier-mâché head, Uncle Sam turning up in your gynecological exam? They're trying to persuade college students not to sign up. In the states, they're trying to persuade state governments, particularly Republican-controlled state governments, to not allow more people in those states to get health insurance. And in a great many places, this roadshow is working. It is having the effect the Koch brothers intend with all the millions they have spent on this cause. That said, it's not working everywhere. Notably, Ohio today became the 25th state to say that they would expand Medicaid to hundreds of thousands more people in the state who currently don't have health insurance or an affordable way to get it. Ohio's Republican Governor John Kasich today steamed past the state's hard-right legislature to get more people covered, even if it costs him the support of some in his own party. Ohio's decision leaves half the states in the country, all of them red states, controlled by Republicans who are refusing to expand Medicaid to cover more people. But these 2 billionaires are trying to hold that line. Do they get their way in the half of the country that is still up for grabs? Can they push their agenda state capital by state capital when the rest of the country is either struggling to make this thing work or just too fixated on D.C. to notice much of what they are doing?